just a little bit of history repeating.
So in our last video, we saw how technical advances like in the plow, canals, steam engine, steam hammer, spinning looms, and all kinds of other things advanced the Industrial Revolution. In this video, we'll take a look at how society, or the way people live their lives, changed as well. Now, because of the Industrial Revolution, there were all kinds of new jobs being created in newly developing cities. Now I know what you're thinking. Mr. Elkin, doesn't everyone still live on a farm at this point? And the answer is yes and no. Now we saw how advances in farming made it so that fewer people needed to farm. That means that there wasn't that much work in rural areas. So people began moving to the city hoping to find work in factories. The movement of people from the country into the cities for work is known as urbanization. The problem with so many people moving so fast is that there was no planning in the cities. So that means there was no sanitation, which makes where you live pretty gross. Living conditions were bad, rents were high, workers had to live near the factories, and those areas were full of pollution, and there was a growing divide between the rich and the poor. While the poor lived in cramped, polluted houses with bad heating and high rent, the bourgeoisie were far away from factories and smog and had more room, so there was less a chance of getting sick. And they had servants to help them out. So you can already start to see the creation of new social classes. We have the industrial bourgeoisie, so the guys who own the banks and factories, or are entrepreneurs. The petty bourgeoisie, so lawyers, doctors, engineers, skilled workers, and then the working class. So these are the guys who just worked in factories. Now the industrial bourgeoisie lived in nice houses, didn't have to do manual labor, and placed a very high value on education, hard work, and being wise with money. They were really the ones who came out ahead in the economic growth of the 19th century. The working class had the fuzzy end of the lollipop. These were the people who had to work in factories. The working conditions in these factories were terrible. They worked between 14 and 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Their bosses were often jerks. If you got ill or sick or hurt on the job, you were fired because you were easy to replace. Now, coal mine was really tough work. The heat inside the coal mine was insane. There was almost no fresh air. The mine could cave in at any time, or you drowned or died because of explosions in mines. And in a lot of ways, mining today isn't that much better. The money was also terrible. A man could make such a little amount of money that his wife and his children often had to work the same hours as the man, but for less money, just to support the family. All this led to a miserable existence with little hope. Alcohol abuse, domestic violence, prostitution, and parents literally abandoning their children became commonplace. Chances were you would be dead at 30, and the only help came from the church. Now I want you to imagine being a kid at this time. You're a kid, so your hands are small, so they can fit in these big, dangerous machines. You could be 6 years old, working in a factory, and lose your arm in an accident. The factory won't help you, and your family can't support you, so they abandon you. Many kids died young because of exhaustion, accidents, or illness. This was the reality of being a child during the Industrial Revolution. Now, in the last video, we started to see the political principles of capitalism and liberalism being called for by the bourgeoisie. They wanted free enterprise. This is where the company can operate without interference from the government. And they also wanted very little government restrictions on what they could do. But like we saw during the French Revolution and the English Enlightenment, there was a recognition that the rights of the individual are actually something that matters. Now, these terrible working conditions led to the workers of Britain organizing in the mid-19th century into trade unions. So a group of workers whose goal it is to make working conditions better. Their only means of negotiating for these better conditions was to strike. But a strike was considered an attack on the rights of factories to make profit, and strikes were actually banned by the government. The unions wanted higher wages, less working conditions, and the right to strike. Now, the trade unions found that they had some allies in the petty bourgeoisie who saw how rough the working class had it. They found socialist political parties to put pressure on the government to pass laws and legislation that would improve working conditions. Some social groups were quite radical and wanted to overthrow the government and transfer the power to the workers. Some of these ideas came from a German philosopher named Karl Marx. He felt that a violent revolution would take place and workers would win. Marx called all the workers of the world to unite and to overthrow the government. The government at the time was not too supportive of any of these ideas. The government repressed or put down these strikes, sometimes violently. They also refused to give rights to workers to organize, which goes against the basic freedoms laid out in the Bill of Rights. The idea of the government was laissez-faire, just leave things alone and not get involved. However, in the 19th century, different labor laws were passed that improved workers' rights, such as kids under 9 couldn't work, some trade unions were allowed, no more than an 80-hour work week for those under the age of 18 and a 48-hour work week for those under the age of 13. Keep in mind that today's work week is 40 hours. There would also be elementary school, free education, and a minimum wage. So there you have it, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was responsible for the founding of many organizations that actually help people escape poverty, such as UNICEF and Oxfam. Some of the goals of these companies are to improve living conditions in society, to get rid of poverty and eliminate child labor. These companies go and push education and improve labor standards for everyone, so we can see how the Industrial Revolution directly influenced the world that we live in today. So I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.